Men and women are different.
I'm not a feminist. I can see men and
When I say I'm a feminist,
This is a fundamental and complete misunderstanding of what feminism is.
We teach girls she.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Feminist is someone who believes in the power of a woman.
Misandry is not equivalent to
Women can't have as much rights as men.
But so many people see the word feminist as a negative thing.
Feminism is not real feminist.
Tell me your most unhinged way that you practice micro-feminism in your life.
I think feminism is the worst thing that ever happened to women.
Let's start with a confession, from all of us, me included. We throw around big words like feminism, equality, empowerment, as if they were accessories we can slip on and off, depending the room we walk into. But have you ever stopped and really asked yourself, what exactly am I wearing when I say these words? Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Most of us inherited our definitions. We absorbed them from culture, from our mothers, from the internet. And very few of us have actually paused long enough to ask, what does feminism really mean to me? Now, here. And who's missing from that definition? In this episode, we are unpacking the labels we wear, the ones that empower us, the ones that exclude us, and the ones that were never designed for all women in mind. We are tracing the journey from feminism to womanism, and from the movements that shaped our freedom to the voices they failed to hear. This isn't a lecture. This is a reckoning with the terms we use, with the structures we've inherited, and with the stories that we tell about ourselves. So, before we begin, ask yourself one thing. If the words we wear shape the world we build, are you sure you're wearing the right ones? Welcome to No Wonder. Let's unlearn together. Before we dive in, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like feminism is this huge confusing topic where you don't really know where you fit? If this hits home, you're exactly in the right place. Hit subscribe so you don't miss another conversation where we break down those walls and we find our path together. Let me ask you something. When you hear the word feminist, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Be honest, because everyone has an opinion about feminism, but few of us actually stop to ask what it actually means anymore. Not what it meant in the 1970s, not what our grandmother thought it was, what it means now in the world we're living in. Feminism is a movement aimed at challenging systemic gender inequalities and dismantling patriarchal norms. But it's also something more slippery than that. It's complex, multidimensional. You can't reduce it to a bumper sticker, although people try to. And it's exhausting, isn't it, that we're still trying to explain feminism because these misunderstandings persist. Fueled by resistance, cultural inertia, or political backlash. We are explaining it to people who see it as threatening rather than freeing. And we are explaining it to people who think they already know what it is, but they only know its caricature. Here's where it gets interesting. Feminism and gender equality aren't quite the same thing. Gender equality sounds clean, doesn't it? Measurable, equal pay, equal representation, equal rights. But feminism tries to dig deeper. It questions power structures. It asks uncomfortable questions about culture and identity. Who gets to define the normal? When we flatten feminism to just gender equality, we risk losing this nuance, the messy, the necessary work of understanding how oppression actually operates. So, what do people usually get wrong? Usually it's something like they hear feminism and they think man-hater. They think extreme, they think exclusive. But feminism is not about supremacy. It's not a monolith, but an evolving discourse engaging with race, class, sexuality, and other intersections. It's about liberation and justice, even when its methods get contentious. Now, why definitions matter today? Do they just limit us? Precise definition can empower clarity and strategic action, but rigid ones exclude important perspectives. There is this tension between wanting a word that means something solid and recognizing that feminism has to stay fluid to stay alive. That is the fatigue you're feeling every day, the push and pull between clarity and complexity. But let's shift gear for a second. Close your eyes if you can and imagine this with me. What a truly equal world feel like? Not just look on paper, what it would feel like to wake up in it. Feminism wants to dismantle systemic gender oppression and patriarchy, striving for social, political, and economical justice. That is just the official answer, but let me translate it. They want a world where gender doesn't predetermine your possibilities, where the personal is political isn't just a slogan, but it's a recognition that personal experiences of oppression reflect broader societal structures. Throughout history, the feminist movements have focused on securing legal rights like voting, workplace equality, and reproductive freedom, education access, and combating violence against women. Each generation adding another layer, another demand, another group saying, "What about us?" If feminism actually succeeded, and I mean really succeeded, daily life would see the dissolution of gender-based discrimination and stereotypes. We would see equitable participation in all domains, freedom from violence, fair representation in leadership. Imagine that, walking down the street without the mental calculation for safety, applying for a job without worrying if your competition is male, existing without performing gender for an invisible audience. But here's the question that somehow keeps me up at night. Could there ever be a world where we don't need feminism anymore? Or would we always reinvent it, always find new inequalities as society evolves? Which this brings us to the uncomfortable part. Whose feminism are we even talking about? Historically, dominant feminist narratives have centered white, middle-class women's experiences, leaving out women of colors, LGBTQ+ people, disabled women, and those in the global south. So, when we talk about the feminist movement, whose voices are we actually talking about? Every movement is born from exclusion. Ironic, isn't it, that feminism itself has been guilty of the same thing? Let's talk about waves for a minute. You've probably heard this before, first wave, second waves, and so on. The first wave focused on legal right and suffrage. The second expanded to workplace equality and reproductive rights. The third wave brought attention to diversity and intersectionality. And the fourth wave emerged in the 2010s with digital activism and social media mobilization. Each wave, though it was solving problems, left someone out. The fourth wave, if it exists as its own thing and people still debate it, is recognized for leveraging online platforms to amplify diverse feminist voices, addressing contemporary issues like online harassment, with more global and intersectional awareness. It is hashtags, viral moments, and collective outrage that finally feels like it would stick. But let me tell you about British feminism for a second, because it's the perfect example of how context shapes everything. British feminism was influenced by class struggles and colonial legacies, but often got critiqued for overlooking women of color and working class experiences. Save movement, different blind spots. And this is why some thought that we needed something new, which is why Alice Walker sat down and said, "This isn't working for us." Womanism arose to address experiences of Black women and other women of color marginalized in mainstream. It wasn't a rejection of feminism, it was an expansion, a saying, "You're not seeing the whole picture, and we are tired of being the footnote." The friction isn't a flaw. It's the fuel of the movement. These tensions between ways, between perspective, between women who need different things from the same movement, this is what keeps feminism honest. So here enters womanism. not as an opposition, but as a mirror held up to feminism, asking, who's missing from this reflection? Alice Walker coined the womanism term in the 1983-1984 collection In the Search of Our Mother's Gardens to articulate a feminism rooted in Black women's experiences that embrace race, ethnicity, class, culture, and community. I'll say it again. Race, ethnicity, class, culture, and community. Not just gender, everything that shapes who you are and how the world sees you. In literature, this matters beyond the page. Womanist literature centers Black women's voices that mainstream feminist literature marginalized, revealing intersection of racism, sexism, class oppression, while still embracing themes of resilience and spirituality. Think of The Color Purple. Think of stories where survival isn't just endured but transformed into something powerful. Here's what makes womanism different. It emphasizes intersectionality before the term even became popular, acknowledging that race and community shapes women's experiences as much as gender does, insisting on communal bonds and collective survival. It's less about the individual woman breaking the glass ceiling, and it's more about lifting each other up, carrying culture and history forward together. So what these two approaches can learn from each other? Feminism can learn from womanism the importance of centering marginalized voices and addressing interconnected oppressions, whereas womanism can benefit from feminist critiques on global gender justice. The dialogue between them can create something that is richer than either alone, a framework that is both global and deeply rooted, individual and collective. So, the revolution isn't in the term we use, it's in how we'll listen when somebody uses a different one. So if equality is the dream, we need to talk about who's building it. And it should be all of us, not just women, not just the converted ones. Let's start with the uncomfortable question of the day. What role do men have in this? Men have an important role as allies and participants in dismantling the patriarchy. And feminism applying to men means recognizing how restrictive gender norms harm them too. It isn't charity. Men who engage with feminist ideas are far more likely to confront sexism for the right reasons. Not to rescue women, but to dismantle the system that cages everyone. So, what do we actually need from that? Comprehensive gender equality curricula that dismantle the harmful stereotypes that we still see today. We need to promote emotional literacy and consent from an early age. And we need to see representation of diverse masculinities and women's empowerment in the media and in the politics. We need safe spaces for honest conversations. And we need to stop gendering emotions and ambitions. But more than that, raising a generation that sees equality as a given requires early and ongoing education, shaping their attitude to value fairness. Telling stories that connect equality to everyday life through the media, family, school, and the culture overall. These need to be made feel like it's normal, that it's inevitable, and that it's not an exception to see equality as a given. The stories we tell do matter. The symbols we create do matter. And the small everyday acts of choosing equity over comfort, they all add up. They keep the movement alive, not just an abstract idea, but in practice. Change doesn't happen behind closed doors. It's relational. It requires all of us to show up differently.
If today's talk hit something inside, then that's exactly why you should subscribe. Every episode is here to support you, unfiltered, real, and raw. And if you know someone who's on the same path, you should share this episode with them, because from now on, they no longer have to figure this out alone.
So, Today we are at the end of our journey together, and I wanted to ask you something again. What do we call this really? Feminism, womanism, humanism, equity, justice? Maybe it's none of them, or maybe it's all of them at the same time. Probably it's just not about the label at all. What I'm trying to say is that there is a difference between saying I am a feminist and I act like a feminist. One is an identity, the other is a practice. One sits still and the other moves through the world making choices, unlearning patterns, showing up when it's uncomfortable. Think about one belief that you had to unlearn about womanhood or about equity. We all have them. I do. They are little inherited ideas about woman should be. What strength look like? Who deserves protection and who deserves freedom? And if someone says to you, I believe in equality, but I am not a feminist, what would you tell them? Would you argue over the word? Would you ask them what they're doing with that belief? How that shows up in their life? And who it makes space for? Because maybe that's the secret overall. Not which word you wear, but what you are building while you're wearing it. So today, I'll leave you with this. Which word do you wear, and what does it say about the word you're building? Good night.